We're live. Hello, witches. It is Keldon. I hope you're all doing well. I'm super excited because I am joined today by a fellow author, Astrea Taylor, author of Intuitive Witchcraft. And yeah, so before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge everything that is happening right now in the world, especially in my home state, Minnesota. We know that there's a lot of protesting happening, a lot of big change. My heart is out there right now with all of the protesters. I have friends out there. And yeah, it's hard to know what to say besides encouraging all of my fellow white people to do better, to educate yourself, to work towards understanding your privilege, even like your own biases that are uncomfortable, but really looking and doing that work so that we can do better. I also just really encourage people, especially those people who are kind of looking at this and having more of a judgmental standpoint, especially around like, oh, like looting and damage, like to really do your research, look into, I mean, especially like a lot of the small businesses that are being damaged. I mean, the owners are coming forward and saying, you know, we understand why this is happening. And you really have to look into why, you know, so that being said, hello, welcome. So do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I am a blogger at Pathos, and and it's really fun because it's instant gratification of creativity. I just love putting my thoughts out there and then immediately getting some reception. It's really, that's how I started with pagan witchy writing stuff. And, you know, when I first was doing that, I didn't know if anyone would want to know what I had to say, but, you know, apparently it's working out really well. You know, because I don't come from
Yeah.
a tradition. I love the traditions and I learn so much about them whenever I learn from them. But I just do little things here and there that work out for me, and I just have a great time doing that, and it works. So, you know, it's very different from some people's, but for other people's, it looks very similar. You could say I'm an eclectic witch. I kind of identify with that, and intuitive witch and pagan as well. But yeah, and I'm also a fiction writer and a fire dancer. And I have a subscription box business with astrology and habits. And yeah, I love all things about the creativity and stuff.
Yeah. So again, you wrote this book, Intuitive Witchcraft, How to Use Intuition to Elevate Your Craft, which I just love that idea of like elevating your craft. And there's so much, like there's so much in this book. You talk about like pretty much everything. Like if somebody was coming to witchcraft as a beginner, like this would definitely be a really helpful resource. There's just, yeah, like I'm just going to gush about it a lot, and there's a lot that I want to say about it. So like you can see, I've got like, I like went through and like was putting in tabs because I want to make sure to talk about all the different things. But I mean, really, this book is grounded in the idea of tapping into your intuition and how you can utilize that. I mean, really to create a path for yourself that's really personal. And I think that is something that in some ways, like, well, because you bring up this idea, right, of like eclectic witchcraft, and you talk about that in the book and how there's similarities and differences between that and intuitive witchcraft. I know you were talking you're talking with Jason Mankey about creating this like diagram someday, but but I think you take eclectic, like the idea of eclectic witchcraft, and I think you give more substance to it, if that makes sense. Like, I think oftentimes when we hear about like eclectic witchcraft, we think of just like, oh, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to meh. But like with intuitive witchcraft, it feels like there's more structure to it in a sense. I don't know if I'm doing this justice.
Yes, you are. I love organization and structure. So that makes sense. And that's kind of like, I do have this and that, but it's also grounded in well-informed choices and feelings and experiences. And yeah, and I think we all use intuition in our practices, pretty much everybody. Maybe there are some people who don't, but this kind of shows you how you can use it in the practices and really get something from it. Like, first of all, connecting to it is kind of a hard thing for a lot of people because so many things are confused for intuition. There's fear, there's imposter syndrome, there's the societal conditionings, and really getting in touch with that can tell you a lot about who you really are and what is good for you. And that's just the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and so that actually just got me thinking about one of the things that I noticed right away about this book. And I think, like, I feel like I started reading it and I almost like immediately sent you a message because I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so much like psychology in this book. And there's so much that like reading this as a therapist, like I was like, oh my gosh, these are things that I talk to my clients about. Like,
yeah.
And I think that is so awesome that throughout this book, there is this like steady stream of like really empowering yourself, working against things like you talk about imposter syndrome, and really how like tapping into your intuition helps you cultivate a better understanding of yourself. So I think that is like, that's so cool.
I think it's so cool that you're a therapist. That's so amazing. It's one of my favorite topics to study, obviously. But I feel like I could never master that subject personally. And maybe that's why I study it so much. Maybe it's the lack that it drives me to understand it more and go deeper within myself and other people. But I think it's so cool that you're a therapist, like that you help people so much with that kind of stuff. Amazing.
So before we dive a little bit, or we dive more into kind of the specific contents of this book, like I want to talk a little bit about the process of writing for you, because the cool thing is like we were working on our books at the same time. And so that's how we kind of got to be friends, was through this process of like, hey, how's it going? Like, how's your writing process going? Which was so nice to have.
Yeah, it was.
What was it like? What was the writing process like for you?
So this is it's the best book I've ever written so far. And so I put a lot of time and thought into it. I started my proposal a long time ago, just after I first started blogging, and I had brainstormed some ideas. I get ideas like late at night, I don't know but I just type them down or write them down. And I did some brainstorming, which is always a fun thing to do, to connect ideas and then keep branching off, because it just is all written down. You don't have to keep it all in your head. So, it just kind of started to flow. And I just wanted to show someone what it's like to start an intuitive practice, move through some of the basics from an intuitive perspective, like all the tools and how to work with deities and what kind of spirits there are. And then, looking past that is the more advanced stuff, like where do you want to go from here? You have all these abilities. And so I think it just kind of progressed, and I wanted to show somebody like the beauty of an intuitive path and what it looks like for me, what it looks like for other people within the community as well. And, things to think about so you can, help one to grow on.
Yeah. Cool. So the first thing that I kind of like noted in here, and this kind of goes along with talking about kind of that psychology aspect, is, and you talk about, I believe you talk about in the book, I've heard you talk about it in other places, but like, to me, this book has, it's very akin to Women Who Run with Wolves.
Yes.
Like when I was reading this, I was like, oh, this book just feels, it has a very similar vibe. Like when you talk about rewilding, and I love that book too. And so reading this, like I was like, oh, this book would go right next to that book. I think that they are great friends. Yeah. What was that book a big inspiration for you?
It was, yeah. And I often say it's my Bible.
Yeah.
Because
what
I
a great
learned so
Bible
much
to have.
like I started reading it when I was, I think 20 years old, and I have highlighted passages and like notes to the side. And it's interesting. Like it's so dense. It
Right.
takes a long time to read it. And I've gone back through it again and again. And what I pick up from it now that I'm older is different lessons. And I see like, oh, I was learning that lesson back then. That's,
Yeah.
good for you. But then, we really are an evolving awareness and, putting ourselves out there and, self-actualizing and stuff. And I do love the book so much. She's such an inspiration, but I do wish it were more gender non-specific. I kind of like to say like it should be just like people who run with the
Right.
and yeah, sure, if it pertains to some women's stuff, but I think other people can find stories in there that they can relate to as well.
Right. Well, that was like my experience reading it. Like it did, like for me, it didn't bother me that it was specific to women, like, but also like, I feel very strongly towards like my feminine side. So like reading it, like it wasn't hard. It wasn't that difficult for me to like make that shift in my mind, but yeah, such a good book. Like, yeah. So, okay. So you talk about rewilding, which right away I thought was just great. What would you say just to like the people watching? Like, what is rewilding?
I love your questions. These are some of the most in-depth things I like talk about.
I know, like let's just ask like the biggest thing. What is rewilding?
Rewilding is so important because we are conditioned to behave a certain way. We are conditioned, to be polite, to dress a certain way, look a certain way, behave a certain way around certain people, maybe do certain chores or whatever it is.
Right.
But all of that's a construct, and there's this deeper soul beneath that layer. And I don't want to say that layer isn't a part of us. It's something that we work with, but it's not always good for us because it can restrict us. It can hold us back on being daring and maybe, taking a walk around the block. Maybe, some people are too afraid to leave the house. And I acknowledge that that's a real fear for some people, but for some it's not. And I think what some people are afraid of when they think of rewilding and connecting with this like more primal source is that they won't know who they are, but I think that they'll know who they are more. And it's a beautiful thing because when you get in touch with this like more primal aspect of yourself, everything kind of flows a little bit easier from there. And you have this more connection with this inner knowing that is, the intuition and your soul. I think intuition is the way that your soul speaks to you. And so the best way to get in touch with it is to rewild, is to spend time in nature. It's to do fun things that are outside the box. It's to listen to music and dance along and sing as well. It's to take walks when, when it's safe, in a safe place. And so all these things are important, and I don't want to brush them under the rug for, a witchcraft practice that's safe, and normal, and in a box and secure, and everything's fine about it. The wilderness is where so much of the soul is, in my opinion.
Oh, there's so much, so much just came to mind for me, because thinking about intuition, really being the language of this very primal part. And so in traditional witchcraft, we'll sometimes talk about the fetch, which is that very lower underworld aspect of yourself. And that, that's how it communicates, is through art and feelings and intuition. And when we work to rewild, like you said, we engage in these activities that are fun and silly. I mean, and sometimes they're not so fun and silly, but they're really artistic and ecstatic, right? That's another big part they talk about in the book. And I think about the stories you share about fire dancing, is that we can find ourselves sometimes the best when we let go of control. When we really just allow ourselves to be without those kind of societal constraints. It also made me think about how we're both air signs. Just that really free-flowing, vaporous energy.
And well, I think, right now we're in this pandemic era where a lot of people are just hanging out indoors most of the time. And so we're having a problem finding those ecstatic spaces. The dance clubs are shut down, the pagan festivals are shut down. We can't see our friends and just have a little night with them. We can, but we have to be super safe and cautious, and not as many friends, not as close, not as much. And you have to be sure you don't drink from somebody else's wine. So I think it is a momentous time to talk about this, because I think a lot of people need this in their lives right now, that kind of connection to the wild spirit.
Right. I also think too, I mean, it's a good time to also just explore the fact that it's really, I mean, going out in nature is amazing, but we also have access to all of these, as witches, we have access to all of these other worlds. And so right now, we might not necessarily be able to go to different places physically, but can we go to those on a spiritual level? So another thing that I thought was just so cool and so creative was the energy types and the witch's hat, which I'll just show. I thought that was so creative. This witchy spin. It makes me think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I can't remember if you had written that in there, but I think that was such a creative way of just showing how kind of our different energies build, and how we can kind of create a peak. Can you speak a little bit more just about that witch's hat pyramid?
Sure. I love the witch's hat. I love witch hats in general.
I do too.
And I was like, oh my God, this is a pyramid with a little base. And I was like, okay, we have to use this. I think I do say it's Maslow's. It's an interpretation of Maslow's pyramid. So the rim is the physical energy and all those tasks and all the time we spend there. And, if we have that in a good space, we have better emotional energy, which is the the ribbon around the hats and the next rung up, and we can have a better emotional headspace. And then up from we'll feel safe, we'll feel protected if we're nourished and fed, and then going up from there is the mental energy. So that's more about having the ability to think and, do homework if we feel safe, or write a book in our case, or a blog, or, use our mental energy to really think about things and have the ability to command that at our will. And then at the very tippy top is spiritual energy. And so once we have all the bases in a good space, spiritual energy naturally flows. And we can sustain it longer if those bases are well maintained. They're in a good space. They don't fluctuate. And so we don't spend as much time in the little tippy top of the witch's hat, but it's where we find a lot of our value. We get so much out of the spiritual time. And I think a lot of people just do like the physical, emotional, mental, and then they just skip the spiritual. They're like, I'm good. Like they don't want to try for the spiritual, or it just comes to them. They're like, oh yeah. But I think, as witches, we seek it out, and we can use that to our advantage in our practices, because it's when we're in those higher energetic states that we are more self-actualized, we're more magnetic, we have the ability to transmit our desires to the other worlds as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my take on the Maslow.
It's so cool. You did also. I did see there. You did talk about Maslow.
I do like to credit people when credit's.
Well, of course.
I try.
So then another thing that you talk about in this book that I absolutely loved was like using intuition to create personal correspondences.
It's a controversial topic.
What?
It's a controversial topic.
Ooh, why would you say that?
Well, some people are like, you got to follow what's in the book. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, sure, you can do that. That's fine. That you do you. And I think there's nothing wrong with checking a book to see what element or season something corresponds with, if you want to use it or not. Or, but I mean, the real question is, how does it make you feel?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so like that's because that's something that I talk about in my book, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, because I mean, like, really, we're forming relationships. And especially with our intuition, like, we can use that intuition to form this deep relationship with ourselves. Then we can use it to form deeper relationships with other people, including spirits. Yeah. And so like, if you are approaching spell work, and let's say like you have all of these plants in front of you, like you could pull out like Cunningham's Herbal Encyclopedia, or you could talk to them and just be like, hey, okay, I have this goal in mind. Who wants to help?
Right. Yeah. What is the energy? What energy am I attracted to achieve this purpose, this magic? So there's, correspondence, that means talk. But a lot of people are like, oh, I just talked to the book, and the book does this, and that's fine. But talk to the actual plants, talk to the earth, talk to the spirits, talk to the colors of the candles.
I've never made that connection, and my mind is blowing. Like the idea that like correspondence means talk. Like, what? That's so good. Right. Yeah. And like, especially when approaching like one big thing that I like to remind people is that like when you, especially like if you're approaching like that kind of like material stuff, like like herbs or stones, is that like you're not approaching like dead matter. Like you're approaching a spirit.
Yeah.
And like, and those things might not match what's in a book. Like, like you might find like a wild mint plant, and like the book might be like, oh, like luck and money, and the plant might be like, no, I want to help you hex someone. Like, so I think it's really cool that you talk about that in here, and just like forming these personal relationships.
Yeah, I think it's so important, but yeah, like I said, it's controversial,
Mm-hmm.
and to each their own. That's all I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah. Well, that's, and I had a feeling too when you said it was controversial that that's kind of what it's like, because I think we've all encountered people like that, like typically on social media, on whatever platform, that are like, you're using that for that, like you're not doing it right.
I
Like,
hate
well,
those words so much.
says who? Like, says who?
Yeah,
Because
so
when you think
maybe
about
some
these
dead
things,
guy from Italy, who
right? Like these
I
are
don't know.
constructs,
He's dead.
right? So super cool, and it's just like really refreshing to see that in like books, like that we're kind of moving into a direction that is more personal and less about like this is the way it's always been and this is the way it has to be.
Yeah, and I feel like with all of that talk about that kind of stuff, I mean, it's no wonder that people think that
Mhm.
everything they have to learn in witchcraft is a mountain. I mean, sure, it is. There's a lot you should learn. Everyone should learn who studies it, but you don't have to take the steepest hill all the time. That's gonna like
Mhm.
rain rocks on you and tell you you're wrong.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you can
Well,
follow your intuition and be like, that's not the path I want to take. I don't want to keep pleasing those people.
mhm.
There's not a lot of return from that because they'll
Yeah.
just leave you alone and tell somebody else they're doing it wrong.
Right. And speaking of relationships, you talk a lot about spirits in here, which I love. And one of the things, one of the one of the many things that I love about this book is your like you share these personal stories. And there was one where you were receiving messages from Hecate, and she's giving you these assignments.
Yeah.
And I I was just I was laughing. I thought it was such a charming story, where she was asking you to collect these things. Um, and then she's like, paint it black.
Yeah.
And, and you get to this point where you're like, okay, I got you this. What was this? An acorn. And you're like, okay, I've got this acorn. Now paint it black. And like, I think that is just so true to the way that spirits are.
Yeah. And she's not like that to everyone, I've heard.
Right.
She's, to people who were clearly marginalized, she's very welcoming. She actually taps them, I think. But I was very willing to work with her. And so I did all the chores. It reminds me of the fairy tale chores,
Mm-hmm.
they're like
Right.
separate the oats from the straw. And you're like, ugh,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll do it. But yeah, I think it's worth it to do those. But and I think getting tested, it's I think the gods want to know that you do want to work
Mm-hmm.
with them, that you're
Right.
serious. And that's one way to prove it to them.
Right. It's, I think that that is such an interesting concept about the way that they um, kind of test us. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes me think, like, I can think of like all of these instances where like I've had things like that too. Like there was a time not too long ago, I was out hiking and I was collecting rocks in this like stream, and I found this like just huge chunk of like natural quartz.
Wow.
Like, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to take this home. And I was like, okay, I feel like I shouldn't though. Like something's telling me I shouldn't. And I was like, okay, spirits, like, is it okay for me to take it home? And they're like, yeah, it's okay. And so I took it and I like started walking back to the trail, and I was like, no, this doesn't feel right. So I put it back, and it was kind of like a, you pass, like you pass the test. Um,
Yeah.
so like, yeah, sometimes they have these ways of kind of testing our resolve. And
Mhm.
um,
I have dreams where spirits are testing me.
yeah, you talk in here. Another one of the stories that I really loved was your dream about the Baba Yaga. Um,
Oh my gosh, that was so amazing. What an experience. Like, and she didn't test me as much as she just helped me
yeah.
in my time of need, in my time of like, I was in a dark place, and
Mhm.
and I had nothing to lose. I had nothing. I owned almost
Right.
nothing. and I was, just very low emotionally. I was stuck in this really negative relationship, and it was very unempowering. And I knew I wanted to get out, but I also felt trapped in that relationship. So when this dream happened, it was so empowering. And I just remember waking up like crying, like, oh my God, the Baba Yaga, like she eats some people, but she gave me soup. So yeah, that was really special.
Yeah. I keep thinking, I'm like, I bring up these stories and then maybe people watching are like, okay, but what was the story? Well, you're just gonna have to read the book. Because it's just so good. One thing I also really appreciate about this book is you talk about baneful magic.
Yeah.
And you don't sugarcoat it. You do not mince words. And I think that that's really cool, especially because I feel like for a long time that's been really rare in books to talk about it and not just be like, no, it's bad, don't do it.
Yeah.
But you talk about kind of the reasons why someone would do it, and if they are going to do it, like kind of what you can do to protect yourself in that. What was it like for you writing about baneful magic?
Well, I come from a very new age upbringing where there were affirmations only. And I love affirmations, but I also saw the lie in it sometimes. Like, you're saying I'm real thin, but you're eating that donuts. So I think that, sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves, and to just be all love and light is good for some people. It's a good general practice, but I think it to some degree is a spiritual bypasser. It's like I'm just going to forget about my trauma and like just channel love, and you can forgive people that way, and that's great. You can work through your problems that way, or if someone gave you some bad energy, you can just be like, return to sender. So that's kind of where that comes from. And I do have a lot of cautions about it, because I've seen some, newer witches just want to do that right off the bat without understanding really much of anything about energy and some negative repercussions, which I talk about in there as well. But yeah, I think it's just a way to rid ourselves of some of this energy that we don't want in our lives. And there's all kinds of gradations of baneful magic as well. And I do advocate for the same kind of energy going back and forth. Like, don't go in with this much if only this happens to you. But yeah, I don't know. It's another controversial topic with some people, and it's not for everyone. It's a very different path, and I think that you have to know so much about beginning witchcraft before you even attempt it. Like, maybe make sure your good spells work, your love and light spells work, your empowerment spells before you try to do anything.
I think that is excellent. I agree with that so deeply. Like in traditional witchcraft, that's kind of like a big thing that I see with a lot of people is that like, oh, like if you aren't hexing or cursing people, like then you're just this fluff bunny loser. Or like people thinking that like that traditional witchcraft is all about hexing or cursing and things like that. And whether you believe in like karma or a threefold law or whatever, like there's magical basics, like there's magical laws that that what you send out, like you're not maybe going to get it 3 times over, but like there's ripple effects. And when you do those kinds of workings, like you tap into darker energies, and that's going to have some sort of impact on you. And so you really need to be responsible and thoughtful about why you're doing it and what you're doing and how you're going about it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can end up really hurting yourself more than you're getting whatever the intended result was.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And so you talk within the section where you talk about baneful magic, you talked about, oh, where's my tab? I just had it open. You talk about, did I just pull that tab out? Well, basically you talk about negative self-talk and how we kind of work baneful magic like even unintentionally against ourselves. And I thought that was super clever. Just in the fact that we do, our words are spells. And
well, stupid was a bad word in my house. We weren't allowed to say anything like that about anybody else or ourselves or anything. Yeah, it goes back to the affirmations. Because, you know, the affirmations, the New Age church that I went to is very magical oriented. It's very like law of attraction. So you don't want to attract stupidity to you by calling yourself. But a lot of people don't realize that it's very common to negative self-talk.
Well, right. And that was one of the things in the book too, that I was just like, oh yes, therapy. Like, because we do, like, we create these, like, we basically create, and I shouldn't say like that, like we do it intentionally to ourselves, but like we have the ability to really create curses. And a lot of times that's the result of outside forces, but we hear negative messages, we internalize them, and then we start to repeat them to ourselves. And it's like we cast this circle over and over and over again in our minds and our hearts. And we start to manifest a reality where we are whatever the negative message is, or not even necessarily about us, but it could be about other people. It could be about the world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like when we start to oh, I don't like this person, and now I'm gonna just start to actively look for only the things that I don't like about this person, and now I'm creating this like almost glamoury around them, where that's all I can see.
Yeah. Giving them like more power when that may not be the case too. Yeah.
So I really appreciate affirmations too, because I think it's the way of dismantling that and creating new ways of being in ourselves. You do talk about shadow work in here, which I thought was excellent, because that gets thrown around a lot, like that idea of shadow work. And I think it's good to have like a really good source on like, what does that mean? Like, how do you start doing that?
It's so important right now in this COVID-19 era, because I just feel like everyone is facing their shadow. Everyone's facing the potential of imminent death and a life that may not have been lived quite as well as they would have liked. You know, maybe your life goals haven't been accomplished, and everyone's running from that fear right now, when they should be running toward it and saying, thank you, great teacher. I appreciate your lessons. I do value my life. I do want to do things with my life, and I'm going to try these things now. Like, this is a lesson that some people can learn if they're not, sick with the COVID-19, which I hope everyone is well and safe and safe. But we have opportunities to embrace what we fear, and not everything. Like, everyone's afraid of jumping off a cliff. We shouldn't do unsafe fears. But I mean, there's so much, we give so much power to our fears, some of them, a lot of them. And really there's energy they're waiting to be harvested for,
Mm-hmm.
you know, our self-actualization, for our magic, for just having a less stressful life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is definitely a big time for shadow work. And that's like one of the things that I like intuitively felt, which is one of my favorite things. That's one of my like favorite like things I say in like sessions with clients all the time is like, I'll be like, intuitively, and then, so like, it's just funny that, you know, reading this book, I was like, yes, okay. Um, but intuitively, like when everything started shutting down, it was like just this feeling that like, okay, here we go. Like now people are going to be stuck in their homes. People are going to be confronted with, because essentially everything's slowing down. And when things slow down, we don't have as many distractions. When we don't have distractions, we have our thoughts.
Yes.
I mean, that's why nighttime is such a significant time for like anxiety and depression, is because we don't have as much going on. And so we're laying in bed and we're just left with our thoughts. And that can be really painful. But it can also be an opportunity. So kind of switching gears, and I apologize because I'm like jumping all over the place.
That's okay. This is great.
You talk about, like, you have a whole section in here about making the mundane magical, which is another thing that I am really passionate about. You know, it like, no pun intended, brings to mind mindfulness, and how we can create magic. Like magic doesn't have to be like these big elaborate things. Like magic can be washing the dishes. If you just kind of focus and let yourself have that magic. How do you incorporate magic into just your mundane life? Or what are some ways you do that?
One of my favorite tips for doing this is taking your time as much as possible. Like, I understand, you know, some people need to rush around for their job, like maybe they're a server or something. But as much as possible, just take a moment and chill, like check in with yourself, check in with the energy around you. Like, I do this all the time. I take a moment in the morning when I wake up. I just like drink coffee with my cat and I pull a few tarot cards, and it's so special. I just check in with the day. Before like I drive anywhere, I just sit in my car and then just feel the energy there. Like, before I start a big project, or when I'm transitioning between two projects at my day job, I take a pause and listen to some music to help me transition a little bit. I find little magical moments, and some of them do involve music or taking a walk. It's a lot of like, don't just react to things. Like, if you have this like thing you have to do, like, don't compulsively do it. Just take a moment and just be true to yourself, so that when you have to make an action, it's not just a reaction, it's a response from deep within. And then you know, those little moments of pause just really help break up a rushed schedule or a busy day. And so I try to do that as much as possible. And like I said, music really helps me channel the moment too. When I do dishes, I like to put on some really good music and like dance at the same time. And it's not like washing the dishes, the physical act of it is magical, but me doing dishes usually would be like, oh man, this is gross, or whatever. But instead, I'm using it as a physical activity to just trance out, listen to some inspiring, uplifting music, and change my energy from something that's just like dishes to, oh, I get to like do dishes and dance and like my favorite song. And so it takes a little bit longer, like I said, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like the cool thing is that like we can turn mundane activities into magical exercises that have like I guess have like ulterior motives.
Mm-hmm.
Like because like when I do dishes, like or like really when I'm doing kind of like household cleaning things, is that like tapping into that power of cleansing. Like
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, like I'm cleaning these dishes like physically, but can I also kind of focus on this as like a representation or like a sympathetic magic of like clearing my mind
Oh yeah.
or like washing away. That's like what I like to do is like taking showers in the morning is just like I'm washing off any stress from the previous day.
Mm-hmm.
Or like I used to have a really big garden space, and when I'd weed, it's like you can sit there and be like, oh, weeds, or you can turn on some tunes and you can like think about like all these weeds are just different obstacles in your life, and you're just clearing them away.
That's
Um,
perfect. I love that.
and then through that, right, then our mood and our magic gets changed for the better.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I also really like what you said about just like taking moments. It's like finding like these like almost like pockets of time and space. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and you talk about time witchery in your book too. And I just think like when you have this like really busy day, you can almost find these like in between moments,
Mm-hmm.
and you just kind of create space in that. And it might just be for like a minute or two,
Mm-hmm.
but like that can be so magical and so necessary sometimes. Um,
Yeah, definitely. uh, I like what you said about like just bringing the mentality and then like the physical action, calling in the magical action when you're
mhm,
doing that action. So it kind of just transcends the physical, transcends the mundane.
mhm.
That's really cool.
So there's so much. I mean, there's so much in this book
It is a
again.
good book, right?
It is a really good book, and it's it's something where I think whether you are a beginner or you've been practicing a long time, like you will find things in here that you probably like maybe you've never heard of, or like you'll find things that just really re-inspire you. And that's why, you know, when it says like elevate your craft, like I think it really does, is because um and you've talked about this, is that like intuitive witchcraft is something that can be brought into any tradition, into any practice.
Hmm.
um and it really boosts it. It adds new insights, and because it's bringing you back to yourself. Um,
Yeah, the more you of yourself you put into your magic, the more
mhm.
personal and relevant it's going to be.
um, oh, the other thing I was going to say too is like when I started reading this, like you throughout the book weave this like imagery about the forest, and you're in the forest and you're following this path, and I was like, yes. um,
Because you use it in yours too. It's
mhm.
perfect.
And so I was like, oh, it's so cool just to walk like another path.
Yes.
Um,
It's
and
not one of the broad paths.
right. Um, and I just love that. I like the imagery and the imagery and the language you use throughout this book is really phenomenal, and like it's really engaging and really just connects you. Like you're not just reading like a book where you're like, okay, like yep, I'm learning these things. Like you're like,
Mhm.
oh yes, like there's definitely, because you write fiction,
Yes.
and there's definitely like you can feel that in this. Like you can feel the creativity. Um,
Hmm. Well, and so being a fiction writer, I just love the way a work of fiction can transport your mind and
mhm,
your body and your feelings to another realm. And you get all these sensations when you're reading. You get these like mental feelings and like these other emotions, and they're so much more personal than watching TV, watching a movie,
Mm-hmm.
and because they're all personal to you. You know, like if I say it's a tree in the woods, you're going to think of a tree. I'm going to think of a tree, and they're probably going to be different. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you're going to think of like if it's a magical tree, like it's, you know, you're going to see different things that are magical to you. And so, one of the goals I have in my writing is to make all my works, all my books, something that can just take you away from the mundane world just for a little bit, just to like infuse it with a little bit more magic. And so I do like to set the scene, you know, with the paths. And in one of the chapters, there's information about the void, where it's permanently light,
Mm-hmm.
and the dark ocean and the pools on
Mm-hmm.
the shore, and you look into the black pools. So I like to set the stage. I'm a little bit dramatic too. I like to,
I love it. I love drama. I love drama in the right context.
Little drama never hurt nobody.
So yeah, so that's Intuitive Witchcraft. And again, anybody who's watching this, I really encourage you to check out this book. And it's like, it's a long book. I mean, like a long book in the best way possible. Like, so you are going to find a lot in here.
Yeah, and there are passages from some really wonderful people,
yeah,
who know a lot of things. And I chose the people for those passages because they're so good at talking about that kind of stuff.
mm-hmm.
You know, like Lisa Bland's, Matt Oren. We got so many people that just can talk about how to approach something with intuition. And so that's something I just love. It's just, I love sharing stories, and I love sharing knowledge and wealth and ideas with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, is it okay if I talk about air magic real quick?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So you go ahead, talk about air magic.
So I have another book coming out next year with Llewellyn. It's going to be April 8th, 2021. And so air magic is all about the element of air. And it is communication. It's the mind. It's the breath. It's connected to the spirits. And there are so many magical things about the element of air. And so this book goes deep into the mythologies, the history of the human mind and spirits, like how we started out with animism, like everything's alive and has an energy. And then, you know, into ancient paganism, where we named those energies and personified them. And then, you know, the spirits as well. And then into the Middle Ages, where all those things were just repressed for so long. And now we have all this freedom again. And, you know, this is the age of information. It's like the age of air, in my opinion. But it's also the age of disinformation. So we really have to use discernment, another air quality, when it comes to everything in this day and age. But it has everything. It has like spells. It has some meditations. It has a big chapter about incense, and some more writers as well. So we just finished that up. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out next year. So.
I'm so excited. Like, yeah, total air sign. That was like one of the things I remember, like when I was like first coming into witchcraft. It was like everybody was like, "Oh, what element are you?" Like, and everyone's like earth and water, and like I was like air. Like it feels sometimes I feel like air is like almost like the Hufflepuff of like the four elements.
Oh my gosh!
Like,
oh my gosh, that's so
like. Which is funny because I guess like that doesn't necessarily correspond to what the different houses actually are or supposed to be, but like I just feel like everybody always gravitates towards the other three. And for me, like, right, it's that like it's the writing, it's the speech, it's the ideas.
You know, and one of the best things about air is that it's all around us. Like I'm in the second story of my house. I'm not connected to earth. I'm connected to things that were made from the earth, but not the earth. I have a glass of water, but I'm not connected to a body of water. I don't have any fire around me at all except for the sun, but I am swimming in air. And then, this is like not just our air, there's a magical realm of air that's all around us as well. And so when we transmit our will when we project that out, we're using the element of air and the spirits there to communicate our intentions and let them travel far and wide. So that was one of the best parts about learning more about this, is getting a closer connection with the magical realm of air.
Yeah. Cool. So super excited for that to come out. Do you have any other like projects on the horizon? Anything else you want to share or talk about?
I was just asked by Llewellyn to do the spell a day. So 25 spells. I think it's probably going to be 2022, and then the magical almanac as well, 2022. But yeah, I'm a free agent for the most part right now, except for all my other businesses. I have no book deals right now, no big ones. So we'll see what comes after this.
And you do the Blessed Bee boxes.
Yes, I write rituals and astrology for those. So it's a new moon box for the solar Sabbath. And those are really fun because I work with this lady who does the chakra box, and she's wildly successful. She has so many subscribers, and I was so honored that she asked me to do it. And of course, like, we're old friends from a moon group, so it just works out really well. And we get to choose like really high quality items to put in there. We're supporting a lot of local artists too. So it's really fun. You get like a tea, a bath salt, a candle, some kind of incense or burnable item, and my astrology. Sometimes there's a magical item, and she does an essential oil. It's all organic and vegan and diluted properly, all the good stuff.
Cool. Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say. I'm just so happy to have gotten to talk to you today.
Well, and we were supposed to hang out at Paganicon. And I don't even know if it's going to be on in September, but maybe.
Hopefully. I mean, that's like the thing. I was like, that was such a bummer. Like, totally understand.
Totally understands.
I think because like all of these other events like after that like got canceled too, but like so that was like the first one was like just the heartbreak of it, and now like I'm like, okay, I get it, but
that would have looked really bad if everyone had gotten coronavirus from the festival.
Well, and I mean it's just there would have been no way to like safely do that. So, but so it's good just to be able to hang out online.
Yeah. Well, and then there are going to be live events too. I just learned I'm going to be a host for Witchfest USA.
You are?
Yeah, in July. And
cool.
So we're in the birch forest here with my peers, and I'm so flattered they asked me, and I was like, yes, thank you, yes. So, have you been to that?
No, I've never done that one before.
Seems so. These online festivals, though, like that's the future.
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna be presenting at the Salem Witchcraft and Folklore Festival.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so they just are now switching it to being a completely online thing, which is really good because like I was really want to present at that, and like I was like, oh, it's going to be canceled, and so I'm glad that they went ahead and they're doing it online. And that's in August too. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we're all going to be learning a lot about this age of Aquarius kind of mentality, and still being able to connect spiritually, but it's through the airwaves,
right, through technology, which can totally be magical.
Right. And I just want to say I love your books so much. Like,
oh my gosh, thank you.
Read it again and again. Like, I read it one time and I'm like, oh yeah, there's going to be a boomerang. Like, I learned so much, and I just love how you cite all your sources and everything. It was beautiful.
Oh, just wait till book 2. Like,
Oh,
what?
I didn't know there was a book 2.
Yep. So I'm working on book 2 right now, and it's all about the Witch's Sabbath.
Oh, nice.
And so like the whole first half of the book is like historical folklore information, and like I'm a little afraid of what Heather's gonna say because I'm like 4 chapters in and I have over 200 footnotes.
Oh my God. I just did this with her. Yeah.
So I'm like, but they're necessary footnotes because I have so many examples.
Okay. We both come from academia though.
Yeah.
So maybe so. You know what I think is, write the book with the footnotes, and then if she says take some out, do it. But then save your copy with the original footnotes in case they're like, what's the source?
Yeah, because it's a lot. This has been the first half of this book is definitely very air oriented, like just constantly surrounded by stacks and stacks of books. And like looking right now at like my internet browser, I have like 20 plus tabs open.
Like, close any of them, right?
Right. And then like if your computer like restarts on its own, like you're just like
what was it?
No.
You can look at history. Yeah, you can look in your history, browser history.
Yeah.
I took my citations down from 99 to 11. So Air Magic, she was like, it's okay, you don't have to have all the facts cited. But academia says you do. It's one
right. Well, and like my big thing is that like when I read a book, like if it's like, oh, like here's this example, like so let's say like in this book I talk a lot about different cases from like witch trials. If it's like, oh, like in 1662 so and so said this thing in their confession, it's like I want to know like, okay, well, where did that come from? Like, can I go read more?
Right. And did they get the quote right? Did they interpret it correctly?
Right. Cause yeah, like I always want to know more. Like I'm like, okay, cool. Like, so that's like one piece of this confession. Like what else is in the confession?
Right.
So we'll see. We'll see what they say. I'm fingers crossed that they're not going to be like, you need to fix this big time.
Yeah, you might be okay. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
a bigger book though, probably, right? Like 80,000 plus, I'm guessing.
What was that?
It's probably going to be like a bigger book, so I think it'll be okay.
I don't know. That's like my big thing is that like I find that I struggle the most with like writing a lot. Like I feel like I tend to write in a very like concise way, which that's not to be like disparaging of like other books or anything. Like I feel like I tend to underwrite. So my goal is 60,000, which was the same for my first book. So
yeah, you'll be fine.
Probably going to be about the same size.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that I think my book is going to be like this size, and that size just can't take the footnotes very well.
Yeah,
so that's fine.
Yeah, that's like the one thing is like some of the pages have like a huge chunk of the page is just like footnotes.
Right.
But it's necessary. I believe it's necessary.
I love it.
Yeah.
Like, footnotes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I just hope everyone's doing really well, and thanks for listening, guys. Like I just, it's my goal to empower people to find their own spirituality and truth and support them in that. So I do have an Intuitive Witchcraft Facebook group. It's private. So if you're in that, just send me an application, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great path. So we welcome people, and we talk about intuitive witchcraft stuff, some empath kind of things as well, and just being a sensitive person and trying to find our way around. The community is amazing too. I have to say, they're all so nice. Yeah,
and then when we're done, I will put links, any links that you want in like the little description too, so people
Awesome.
can find those things.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here and just hanging out. Thank you for writing this amazing book. It's Yeah, it's just, I feel like there have been so many really awesome books coming out in like the last few years. And it's just really great to feel like now, like when people ask like, oh, like what books would you recommend to a beginner? Like, I feel like for the first time in a long time, like actually have like this book, this book, this book. Versus like for a long time, I mean, we have these like very classic, like beginner go-to books, but they're kind of becoming outdated
They are.
in a lot of ways. And so it's really good to have more like modern books to recommend to people. So this is definitely one that I recommend.
Thank you. And we're getting out of the age of cultural appropriation more and more. So it's
oh my gosh, yes. Like can we move away from like witchcraft is just shamanism?
Oh my gosh.
Like, can we stop?
It's like such a big box to open.
But yeah, I know, right? It's like, yeah. Well, on that note, I hope everybody is doing well. I will talk to you all soon. There's a very loud motorcycle going by. So, yeah. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.